Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at our first ever Spotlight event. It's our quarterly product launch event where we kind of peel back the layers behind Zuddl, what we did over the last quarter, and show you a little bit about what we're going to be doing over the next couple of quarters as well. It is our first one, so it is definitely going to be a lot of whatever we did over the last few quarters all at once. But yeah, hang in there with us and let us know if you have any questions. Like Mark said, our goal is to really help give visibility and help drive revenue outcomes with events and webinars. And the way we like to think about it, it's in terms of one, driving attendee turnout. Two, within the webinar or event, how do you engage both from a branding perspective, but also an interaction perspective? And then how do you convert those attendees into prospects and move people further down the funnel? So yeah, we'll be peeling back a few of the layers behind all of that and telling you a little bit about how Zuddl can help there. But in the meantime, we would love to tell you a little bit about, as we're talking to people in the field, what we've been hearing across the board from all of the customers and research that we've been doing. So I think first off the bat, I think just pat on the back, event marketers over the last few years have truly been superheroes and been through a lot. There's a lot that's been changing in the landscape. And people, you all have been keeping up with it, really evolving strategies and staying on your toes. So, really great job there. With COVID, everything changed. Everyone pivoted to virtual, kind of forced into it. But over the course of that, people figured out a lot of different strategies and new channels that they were using. And then as COVID kind of faded, attendee behavior started changing. And so we kind of had to adjust again, even though, in-person was coming back, but attendee behavior wasn't quite exactly the same as it was before COVID. So, then there was a lot of figuring out what is the new normal and what types of things are attendees going to, what would they engage with, and so on. And I think soon after that, we're kind of in this new world. We're not yet at a new normal where it's the recession, budgets are getting tighter, but expectations to deliver are still just as high or higher. And so people are getting a lot more creative, trying out a lot of different types of events, new types of events. So that's been really, really interesting to see. I think not just over the last 3 years, over the last decade, we've seen a huge shift, right, in events from a brand building activity to more of a demand gen function, and with expectations tied to events, goals, revenue outcomes, more measurable outcomes tied to events. And I think over the last decade, with technology evolving, with COVID over the last 3 years, everyone trying out virtual more, I think a lot of things became more measurable. And so, what are we going to do with that data? And the thirst for data has definitely shifted over the last few years. And but I think with that in mind, there's obviously one extreme of not really being able to measure anything, and then I think while we have all of these tools to be able to do that today, what we're really seeing is a lot of people innovating on focusing on the attendee and the audience, and that's really the events that we're seeing do really well right now. Because yeah, you can measure a bunch of things, tie things to your goals. That's definitely what we want to do. But at the same time, it's important to keep in mind, what does your audience want? Why are they showing up to your event? It's not just about your goals and why do we want to run this event? What are we trying to drive out of it? But yeah, what is going to encourage people to come? What are the outcomes? Is it content? Is it networking? Is it building new relationships? And really tailoring an experience around that. So I think, yeah, we've seen really, really interesting things from customers that we're talking to, whether it's, people with really high account value customers just flying their user conference. We were talking to someone who just flew out all of their top customers to one in-person user conference paid for the whole thing. We have people who are experimenting with hybrid roadshows. We have people experimenting with flying a bunch of their like an offsite kind of summer camp type of experience. So really, really unique formats that are coming out of focusing on what the audience wants. And I think the theme really is you need a mix. It's really going to be different for every person based on who your audience is, what outcomes they're looking to drive, and what is your, how is what is the product you're selling, and so on. So, Caitlin, I'd love to hear from you in terms of the event mix and how that's been evolving.
Yeah, so I mean, thanks for setting that wonderful context, Veda. We have seen, and I've been doing events for about 15 years or so now. The event mix has changed drastically. I mean, it had to happen at some point of time, but the last few years kind of accelerated it, right? They're not looked at just as a branding activity anymore. So, I mean, try getting an approval from a CMO or a CFO by telling them, oh, we're doing this for branding. Their reaction will be something worth a lot of views on Instagram or TikTok. But so there has to be a direct line of revenue to any event that goes, right. And we're seeing this because events are also becoming a very important part of the overall demand generation strategy, right. So they're as important as a content or a digital function now. So they're integrated into demand generation now. And that also means that the way event marketers are looking at events has to change, and it has to now correlate with different stages in the attendees or the user's life cycle, right? Even the marketing funnel. So that means that doing one type of an event and hoping that it will address the needs and requirements for everybody in the funnel, it's not going to fly anymore. We will have to think really strategically about the kind of events we want to do. It's no longer about quantity; it's more about quality. Getting the right people to hear you out, getting to the right people to attend your event, because eventually this will turn into a content flywheel that folks will use further down the road. Events are expensive, they're time consuming, they're resource intensive. So obviously there's a expectation of an ROI. The ROI may be a couple of quarters down the line, but it has to have a direct line, right? I mean, and just getting into a little bit of detail here. If you're looking at mapping events to your life cycle, that also depends largely on where you as an organization stand, right? So your event mix will change basis a lot of things, right? Your average ACV, where you are in terms of your own life cycle, who are the who's your end customer, what's your ICP looking like, and things like that. So if you're a fairly young, fairly unknown company, frequent and regular webinars will do the trick to help you build awareness top of the funnel and get your word out, right? And that's also provided you have a very strong point of view, or you have a point of view, because everybody's doing webinars and not all of them are very successful. So you don't want to run for a quantity there, beg your pardon, right at the beginning, but you're looking at getting the right people in. And don't worry too much about getting tons of people to register. Just get the right ICPs to attend, and that would count as a success in my book. And at that stage, it's very, very tempting to go and attend these large scale events, spend a ton of money on booths, sponsorships, in the hope that this will bring some sort of a visibility. But alas, no. Even in the good old times, this was still very difficult to achieve. It's even more difficult now. It's good to go attend events, go meet people at booths. You'll probably find your ICPs manning those booths, talk to them. That's a good way to look at events. When you're younger, when you're younger in your organizational life cycle, and you're still figuring out, where you want to go. So your event mix will largely be low cost, frequent events. But if you're looking at somebody in a little bit of a mature company, or ACV is a slightly higher, early five digits or whatever, then you might want to look at a little more involved events. For example, this event that we're doing in terms of a product launch, it's largely middle of the funnel event for us, right? We want to talk about the product. Our product is at a stage where it's a full-blown suite of a unified events and webinar platform. So this kind of events are very, very good to kind of help you build that trust in your audience, who are still evaluating, for whom you're still in the consideration set. And as the organization matures, as you get more high value ACVs, like you were talking about a bit earlier, then you might want to get into these private intimate events where you're inviting just a handful of people, right? And remember, these events are also for you to be able to show your prospect that you are the right decision. In many ways, you're helping them make that decision. And not to forget, right, they're going to be spending time away from their desks, so it has to be a lot of value for them. This becomes a very important part of your event mix. Maybe that's the only thing you're doing after a certain stage. And that's perfectly fine, right? This is a good opportunity to network for people who are coming, and these are all high value people, decision makers. So you want to make sure that there is a certain value that they take back. We always used to say that even if you get a couple of contracts on these kind of events, you've more than recovered the cost. But it's not enough to recover the costs. Now you've got to go above and beyond that, right? Otherwise you're not getting the budget for the next year, for sure. And event mixes so far were being built in isolation by marketing teams, right? So somebody had a mandate, you had a demand generation person or a field marketing person. They would come up with a list of events, quarter on quarter or for the year, and then decide which ones to participate in, which ones to sponsor, and so on and so forth. It's not going to fly now. You've got to bring in the other teams from the organization. You've got to bring in your sales folks. You've got to bring in your customer success to build that event mix, right? Because unless it's a full team effort, your event mixes are not going to fly at all. Um, the other thing that I did mention and touch upon briefly was, you want to look at the average contract value in terms of what kind of contract sizes do you have. If it's not a very big size, then there's no point going after large events and sponsoring booths and dropping a $500,000 there. Regular webinars can do just fine. Regular touch points with sales can do fine, and that's where it's important to build these strategies in conjunction with these teams, right? So yeah, I mean, to cut a long story short, these event mixes have come a long way. And there is no organization that's just doing one type of an event anymore. It's a mix of two or three things, right? They might be a little further off in their journey for something like hybrid, which a lot of folks are still trying to figure out. But webinars and in-person events and a mix of in-person conferences are what we see a lot happening, right? So yeah, that's where we are right now.
Yeah, and I think it's also been really interesting to see, like, as different GTM motions have evolved for selling, like there's also certain types of events that fit along with that. For example, if you're more like community led, the type of events that you do to build that community, maybe you're a product led company, and in that case, maybe it's going to be a lot of like onboarding, training, webinars,
Yeah.
that type of thing. If you have low touch sales. So it's that has been also like an interesting parallel and patterns that have kind of evolved. So I think if you're looking for inspiration for how to get started with event programs, or just you already have a mature event program that you're innovating and iterating on, just looking at things like, what is your GTM motion? What are similar companies doing? Definitely is going to help. And I would say what's really great about right now is that so much has been changing over the last few years that everyone is really still figuring things out. It's not that anyone has it down pat. And so I don't,
Yeah.
it's the big events aren't your competition. It's not about your events versus some other person's event. It's really about,
Yeah.
what are you doing? You don't have to have the biggest event, but what are you doing for your audience, and how are you adding value for them? And really having that audience first approach is going to help your event program really
Yeah.
shine. And that's what we've been hearing from all of our customers that we've been talking to.
Right. Absolutely, and it's a battle for mind share, right? I mean, if you look at the evolving role of an event marketer, now it's not just getting an event done; it's about having a seat at the table, and this has become very very crucial because you're spending money, so you better show an ROI directly on that. And it's good to see that event marketers now have a say in what kind of a demand they're going to drive and things like that. And it's no longer just going to be only a brand activity. It's integral to organizational demand generation. And event marketers are going to be spending, a very strategic role. They're going to be playing a very strategic role going forward.
Yeah, and I think what we've been hearing from a lot of people is, we've surveyed and talked to hundreds of marketers over the last, few quarters, and I think some really common themes that have emerged there in terms of event strategy. One is everyone is talking about hybrid, but not really, like, I don't think fully diving into it just yet. I think the whole industry is still figuring out what does hybrid mean. It means really different things for different people. But what has been really interesting is it's not just about a single event being hybrid, it's about the overall strategy. And I think we've been we've been seeing patterns in, event programs that are hybrid, like a single program where, maybe you're doing a bunch of webinars, but then in key cities, that same event series you're going to do in person once every quarter, or, you're going to have a series of digital events that build up to this, culminate in this really big in-person event. So really just seeing how event programs themselves are becoming hybrid, that's a really interesting trend that we've been hearing more and more about for 2023. I think, the other thing that we've been hearing a lot about as teams are getting leaner is just, the number of different tools that people are using, whether it's from landing pages to registration, ticketing, virtual events, if it's hybrid, on-site, what's happening, just all of the different things, especially as teams are getting leaner, like having to juggle all of these different tools and having to do a lot of this manual crunching of numbers after events are done, because everything is kind of in these silos. So we heard, I think Mark mentioned this in our intro, but on average, people are saying they're using anywhere from 5 to 10 different tools to get their event programs up and running. So that is something that's really our goal at Zuddl. How do we help in this journey of just tying events to revenue and giving more visibility? And everyone's already doing that effort, and it's just a lot of manual work to show those outcomes. How do we help get that visibility in an easier way, and how do we help enable that more, so that we're able to help drive the outcomes that can help you? So